In this video, we're going to talk about Attila, the man who terrified an entire continent. A leader so feared that cities emptied at the mere rumor of his arrival. A man for whom empires paid mountains of gold just to avoid seeing his army. The Romans called him the Scourge of God, and kings prayed that their names would never reach his ears. He shattered armies, burned nations, and changed the course of history through fear alone. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why hearing the name Attila was once enough to make Europe tremble. When the wind learned a name. In the darkest winters of Europe, when ice seemed to bite the earth and wind crept through every crack of every home, the villagers repeated an old custom. They lit torches, not to illuminate the path, but to drive away that which cannot be seen, but can be felt. It wasn't wolves, it wasn't spirits, it wasn't demons, it was something worse. It was a man whose name traveled faster than any army, farther than any rumor, deeper than any fear. That name was Attila. Attila, the Scourge of God. To some he was a monster, to others a divine punishment, to others a perfect warrior. But everyone agreed on one thing. When you heard his name, it meant he was already close. This is the account of the man history called the Scourge of God, the son of the steppe. The steppe is the place where earth becomes horizon and sky becomes a constant threat. An infinite expanse of grass and wind, capable of giving life or taking it in the blink of an eye. There Attila was born. He had no fine wooden cradle, no soft blankets, no home to protect his cries. He had dusty furs, cold on his face, and a world that did not forgive weakness. The shamans, old men with eyes like dying embers, lifted him toward the clouded sky and bathed him in the smoke of harsh herbs. They said his spirit was too strong for the small body that contained it. They said his destiny was already written. They said he was not a child, but a warning. He grew up watching animals die in cruel winters. He grew up sleeping with a knife beneath wolfskin. He grew up understanding that compassion is a luxury the steppe does not grant. When other children learned to speak, Attila learned to draw a bow. When others learned to run, Attila galloped. When others feared the darkness, Attila grew accustomed to seeing it as an ally. The steppe had no schools, but it had lessons. And the first lesson Attila learned was this: if you are not strong, you are food. Europe breaks. While Attila grew, sharpening his spirit, Europe was crumbling. The Roman Empire, that giant which dominated seas, deserts, and continents, was dying slowly. Its borders were holes, its legions shadows of what they once were. Its emperors changed every few years, betrayed by their own men. Germanic peoples migrated without direction, fleeing from hunger, from their internal wars, and from a mysterious enemy that emerged from the east, the Huns themselves. Rome did not understand what it saw, and what it doesn't understand it fears. The northern kingdoms fragmented. Tribes fought among themselves for ever smaller territories. The entire continent seemed like a wounded animal, surrounded by predators. And among all the predators, one was born stronger than the rest. Attila watched this chaos from a distance, and understood something no Roman king understood in time. The world does not belong to the most just, but to the one who arrives when everyone is distracted. Europe was distracted. Europe was weak. Europe was ripe to fall, and Attila knew it. 2 wolves, 1 throne. Before becoming the absolute king of the Huns, Attila ruled alongside his brother Bleda. 2 leaders, 2 styles, 2 destinies that could not coexist forever. Bleda was diplomatic. He believed in agreements, in alliances, in gifts. He thought true power came from controlling stability. Attila did not. Attila believed power came from will, from fear, from the capacity to destroy. Rome paid gold to avoid his fury, silver, lands, gigantic tributes. While Bleda saw this as a triumph of diplomacy, Attila saw it very differently. He said, "If an enemy pays you not to fight, he has already confessed his fear." The tension between them grew. The shamans noticed it. The warriors felt it. The steppe announced it. 2 wolves cannot lead the same pack. Someone had to fall. And one day, Bleda died. A stray arrow. A hunting accident. A bad omen. No one investigated. No one accused. No one doubted. Because in the language of the steppe, When blood falls to the ground, the argument ends. And the king who remained standing was Attila, the king who ruled through fear. Attila did not govern like the Romans, with scrolls, laws, and speeches. He governed with something deeper, more primitive, more effective: fear. He didn't punish everyone. He didn't shout. He didn't need to raise his hand. It was enough for him to enter the camp and silence would spread like a shadow. The Huns saw him as a being blessed by the spirits, a man whose presence could twist fate. It was said that his eyes never blinked, that his voice could stop an argument, that if he stared at you, the gods could hear your thoughts. Under his command, the Huns became a single creature, fast, savage, unstoppable, an army that knew no fatigue and saw in their king not just a leader, but the embodiment of power. Ambassadors of terror. When Rome wanted to negotiate, when some Germanic kingdom sought a truce, when a people begged for mercy, Attila did not send diplomats. He sent warnings in human form. His emissaries were not messengers, they were omens. They arrived mounted on black horses, covered in leather hardened by the steppe sun, faces marked by scars that told of battles, eyes so empty they seemed not to belong to this world. They entered Roman palaces without looking at anyone. They walked across mosaics without wonder and delivered messages with a coldness so brutal that senators sweated even though the room was freezing. The Romans began to fear them more than the warriors themselves, because each visit brought impossible demands: more gold, more tributes, more land, more hostages, more humiliation. And if Rome refused, if it hesitated for a second, if it tried to negotiate, the emissaries smiled, a thin smile, sharp, almost imperceptible, the smile of someone who knows the war is already decided. Soon a saying emerged among the peoples of the empire: if you see the emissaries, the storm is already upon you. The inevitable expansion. Attila was not just a fierce warrior, he had something even more dangerous: a strategic and patient mind. He understood that the Huns could not imitate Rome, could not build cities, maintain roads, or raise walls. What they could do was devastate, fast, lethal, without warning. So he attacked where they least expected it, struck weak frontiers, burned small villages to break the large ones, negotiated with tribes only to divide them later, and turned enemies into allies and allies into slaves. Europe knelt without realizing it. Entire tribes bowed before him without fighting. Kings sent gifts hoping to buy clemency. Germanic peoples became Hunnic auxiliaries for fear of being destroyed. The Ostrogoths, one of the most powerful tribes, ended up under his shadow. The Gepids accepted him as master. The Alans surrendered. Each victory did not just add lands, it added fear, and fear is the best messenger of a king. Attila understood something few leaders understand. If you make your enemy imagine your fury, you have already won before arriving. And so he advanced like an uncontrollable fire. He didn't need to conquer cities to rule them. It was enough for the cities to know he was near. Rome feels cold. Attila didn't need to touch Rome to make it tremble. The empire, divided between east and west, received terrifying news every week. Villages burned, frontiers razed, tributes demanded, hostages taken, colonies destroyed. The Senate debated for hours only to reach the same conclusion: they could not stop him. General Appease, one of the few capable Romans, knew that facing him meant risking everything. The emperors knew it, the people too. Every time a Hunnic horn sounded in the distance, church bells rang desperately. Rome, which once was the owner of the world, now acted like a frightened child. In a tense meeting, a senator said, "Is he a man or a divine envoy?" Another responded, "He is a punishment." And for the first time in centuries, Rome stopped talking about expansion and began talking about survival. That was a victory for Attila, but he wanted another, one that would mark history forever. Total war. The Catalonian plains. Hell opened. Year 451. A day Europe never forgot. The greatest coalition of armies in generations formed. Romans, Visigoths, Franks, Sarmatians, Burgundians, Alans, all united for only one reason: Attila. The Hunnic king also gathered his forces, thousands upon thousands of horse archers, savage warriors, men who lived and died on their mounts, capable of shooting arrows while galloping at full speed. The plains of the Catalonian fields became an ocean of iron. When the two worlds collided, the noise was so deafening that many believed it was the end of times. Punic arrows fell like fire rain. Romans advanced with shields raised. Visigoths charged like enraged giants. Huns circled, attacking from impossible angles. The sky filled with smoke and dust. The ground trembled with the gallop of thousands of horses. The screams formed an endless roar. Attila, in the middle of the storm, positioned himself within a circle of wagons, prepared for the worst. His warriors fought to their last breath. So did his enemies. It was a massacre, a battle without poetry, only fury, bone, blood, and iron. When night fell, no one could sing of victory. Attila did not win, but neither was he defeated. And for a man like him, remaining alive was the greatest threat possible. Italy under shadow. After the Catalonian plains, Attila was not broken, he was furious. And a furious man with an army behind them is an inevitable fate. In the year 452, Attila crossed the Alps and entered Italy like a black storm. The cities that saw him coming did not wait for him to approach. They abandoned them. Entire towns fled south. Mothers, elderly people crossed rivers, hid in forests, left everything behind. Not because they had seen the Hunnic king, but because they had heard stories. Stories that said Attila drank blood, that his warriors had no souls, that his shadow made birds fall silent, that ancient gods guided him. Northern Italy emptied as if a giant hand were sweeping cities from the map. Attila took Milan, took Verona, took cities Rome had protected for centuries. And as the Huns advanced, a question traveled through the empire like poison. What will happen when he reaches Rome? Temples fell silent, markets closed, soldiers prayed, nobles fled. No one could stop him. No one wanted to face him. No one had answers. All of Europe held its breath. The day he spoke with a man dressed in white. Rome no longer had an army, no longer had gold, no longer had time. It only had faith. And so, when Attila camped at the gates of Italy, a man approached without weapons, without escort, without protection. Pope Leo I, an old man dressed in white with a crucifix in his hands, advancing toward the king of the Huns as if death did not matter to him. The Huns opened the path, out of respect, out of curiosity, out of strangeness. They had never seen a man face an entire army with only his voice. Leo I reached Attila. The two looked at each other. Two worlds collided in silence, faith against fury, Rome against the steppe, spirit against war. No one knows what words the Pope used. Chronicles say he spoke of the end, of divine judgment, of the importance of stopping the bloodshed. Others say Attila saw an apparition, two angelic figures behind the Pope with flaming swords. Still others, more practical, say Attila feared an epidemic ravaging Italy and preferred to withdraw rather than lose men. But the truth died in that very instant, because no one who was there recounted it with precision. Only this is known: Attila listened, fell silent, and then ordered something no one expected. We're leaving. He withdrew without destroying Rome, without burning temples, without filling its streets with corpses. Rome breathed, the world sighed. And the name of Attila, that name which was synonymous with destruction, became wrapped in a mystery that still fascinates today. What did he see that day? What did he understand? What stopped him? No one knows. But even the doubt was enough to make Attila a figure larger than life. The night that changed the history. A king like this does not die in battle, does not die at the hands of an enemy, does not die by a sword. No. Attila died at a wedding. After withdrawing from Italy, he celebrated his marriage to a young woman named Ildiko. The celebration lasted hours. There was wine, singing, meat, fire, dancing. Attila drank, ate, laughed. For the first time in a long time he seemed relaxed. And as night fell, he retired with his wife to the nuptial tent. The next morning, he did not wake up. The guards found him lying there, his face buried in a bloodied pillow. Chronicles say a vein burst, and he drowned in his own blood. Others say he drank too much, and his body couldn't take it. But there is also another theory, a darker one more consistent with his life. They say he was murdered. They say someone infiltrated, strangled him while he slept. They say his own men feared his conquests would provoke the destruction of the Hunnic Empire. They say the Germans bribed someone in his entourage. They say his wife was part of the plan. There is no proof, no witnesses, no absolute truth, only a corpse, a terrified wife, and a kingdom without a head. The death that could never reach him in battle found him on the only night he lowered his guard. An irony history never forgets. The funeral of the king without a tomb. The Huns did not mourn their leaders like the Romans. They did not write speeches, did not raise statues, did not leave tombs for time to venerate. They did something more brutal, more definitive, more worthy of a king feared by the world. They took Attila's body and placed it in 3 coffins, one of gold to represent greatness, one of silver to represent glory, one of iron to represent war. They buried all 3 together in a secret place, but before doing so, they killed all the slaves who dug his tomb, so that no one would ever know where the Scourge of God rested. And then thousands of horses galloped over the disturbed earth, until any trace of the burial was erased. Not a mound, not a stone, not a mark. Attila disappeared from the earth as if he had never existed, as if he had been a spirit, a punishment, a whisper of the gods. And thus was born the greatest lost tomb in history. The man who taught fear. Attila left no temples, no written laws, no cities, no solid empire. He left something more powerful, fear. A fear so great that it traveled through centuries and is still felt today, when the wind blows hard and strikes windows like an ancient fist. A fear that taught kings that power is not maintained with words, but with presence. A fear that reminded the world that sometimes a man is born who does not want to govern, he wants to devastate. That man was Attila, the son of the steppe, the wolf of the horizon, the terror of Europe, the king who did not need a throne to be feared, the man they called the Scourge of God.